Hi, welcome to anglos.co.il. Today we're going to be speaking with Jay Hait from Hait Family Law, and we're going to be discussing elder law. Jay's been in the studio before and we welcome him back again. Jay, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me again, Warren.
Great. So elder law is not something that I'm familiar with. I didn't know what it was before we began discussing what you were going to talk about today. Can you maybe, to kick off with, just explain to us a little bit about what is elder law and what does it cover?
Yeah, sure. Elder law is really something that, an area of law that covers what happens or what can happen and planning for what we call the golden years.
Okay.
In other words, it has to do with things that have to do with medical care, sometimes things that have to do with pensions and or bituach leumi rights and things like that, wills and estates, and primarily one of the big things in Israel right now is the continuing power of attorney, which is a legal tool, a new legal tool. In other words, we've only had it for like 5 years. That enables a person to make decisions while he is mentally competent for the time that he will be incompetent mentally.
So are we basically talking about somebody, perhaps an elderly person who has maybe is mentally competent, or are we talking about somebody who's mentally impaired?
No. In any case, all of the things that people should be doing or that are doing is while they're mentally competent. When they're not mentally competent already, it's somebody else who's going to be doing it for them. But mostly it's really preparing. In other words, I tell people to start looking at these things when they hit 55, 60, to reassess wills again at that point, to do a continuing power of attorney, to figure out what they're going to be living on for their pension, perhaps shifting around amounts so that they put things into things that are less risky, etc.
Got you. So maybe you can explain for an Ole, somebody who comes here from abroad, can you maybe explain if somebody has an existing foreign power of attorney or a living will that was done whilst they were overseas, will it be valid here in Israel?
So no, it won't be valid here in Israel. What they have to do is they have to do an Israeli continuing power of attorney. The continuing power of attorney in Israel covers some of the things of like a living will or an advanced health directive, but it's really broader. It covers 3 main areas. The first area, or the primary area for most people, is indeed health decisions. In other words, making a decision that says, hey, I want, when I am no longer mentally competent, for example, not to have a feeding tube put in for care. That's one example. But so that's one area, health decisions. The second area is financial decisions. And the third area is personal decisions. And what are personal decisions? Just because everybody asks me. And I always tell them, look, one of the best ways to explain it is really to give some examples of documents that we've done. So in one case, I had a gentleman who was not observant, but said, no matter what, even if it's in a wheelchair, I want to be brought to a Seder on Passover night and to Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur night. I had another woman who said, hey, look around, Mr. Hait. You see all the pictures of my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? I said, yeah. She said, even if they put me into an assisted living facility, I want these pictures there. I want to see them every day. I've had people tell me, well, I want to be brought either to shiurim, to Torah classes, or to have music played on a regular basis for me, etc. But things that personally I would say that people feel help them for their souls. In addition to things like, I want a male caregiver, not a female caregiver, etc.
So basically, it's making all the decisions now while you're mentally competent for a time that you may not be.
Right. What you do is you give guidelines. You say, this is how I want to be taken care of. And then you appoint someone or more than one person to make the decisions. What we usually do in our office, first of all, if it's a long-term marriage, most people elect their spouse to make all the decisions. After that, they can have different people making different decisions. For example, I want my son, the lawyer, to make my financial decisions. I want my son, the doctor, to be making the medical decisions.
Gotcha.
And I want my daughter, who's closest to me, to make my personal decisions. But again, within the guidelines of what we've already put into the document.
Okay. And is this what they refer to as a decision support advocate, or is that something else?
No, that's something else.
Okay. So you nominate all those people to be involved in those decisions.
Correct.
So then what is a decision support advocate then?
That is a separate legal tool.
Okay.
And basically what it does is it says, I'm still going to be making decisions for myself because I'm still mentally competent, but I'm a little bit unsure.
Okay.
So I'm appointing somebody that when I make my medical decisions, I have to consult with them first.
Okay. And what is the basis for proof that they would then consult with that person?
Right. In other words, a doctor comes and says, hey, you can do treatment A or B or C.
Yes.
And then before me making a decision, I would be consulting with the person that I've appointed as a person. I find that most of the people who do a continuing power of attorney don't really need that document.
Okay.
Because again, when you do the continuing power of attorney, a lot of decisions that you might not have talked about come to the table. In other words, I don't know how other attorneys do it. I know that the way that I do it is I give people a questionnaire to start with. And in the questionnaire, I ask about specific treatments. And then I give a list of scenarios. If this happened to you, which of the following treatments would you want, A, B, or C? And I give them a list of questions. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's the first time people are thinking about these issues. And so I always tell the people in my office, listen, when people don't come back to us for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, it's because they're processing.
Right.
They're thinking about it.
It's a lot of things to think about. A lot of times we don't think about these things happening in the future.
Absolutely.
Can you maybe explain then what is a general guardian and what would the connection then be to the golden years?
Okay, so first of all, they're not garden years. But I just want to give a little bit of background. Okay. Great. The reason that they made this law was, remember, our guardianship law is based on the British law. Okay. And what they found in 2015, 2016 was, even though our population was about 1/8 that of England, the number of open guardianship cases that we had, in other words, of people trying to make decisions for older people or otherwise incompetent people, was the same number as over there, more or less. As a matter of fact, the statistic that I read recently is that 15% of people over the age of 80 in Israel have a guardian appointed for them. Okay. Now, what happens, and this is why it's connected to your question, what happens when a guardian is appointed? Well, we have under Misrad HaMishpatim, the Ministry of Justice, we have something called the General Guardian, and that department would be the place that would appoint a guardian for somebody. It could be either over their body for physical needs or over their money for financial needs.
So they appoint a guardian.
Well, wait. This is if you don't have the continuing power of attorney. And when does that happen? So that's the question. That happens either when there are disagreements between family members over treatment of someone who's incompetent, or it happens when there's a disagreement between doctors or between doctors and family members. Any of these people at those times are able to go and say, wait, we need a guardian appointed. And it's a court process. And basically the legislature said, hey, you know what? This is ridiculous. We know that, why don't we let people make the decisions for themselves? And really, it's like appointing someone who's going to be a guardian. In other words, rather than having to go through a guardianship, you've appointed someone to make decisions, and then they expanded it. They didn't do it just over money and health. They said also over personal issues. I think it's an incredible legal, how do you say kli?
Vessel.
Tool. Thank you. Right. It's an incredible legal tool. Because it really lets people have the self-respect that they can make their decisions and not have to worry about, well, if there are disagreements between these people or these people or these people, an outside person gets appointed for me. And by the way, when a guardian is appointed, the guardian gets paid. He gets paid from your funds. Whereas, if you just appoint someone, you can decide to give someone money,
but if you've appointed a family member, they're doing it for your well-being.
Then usually they don't.
Okay. So you would have to pay that appointed guardian.
Right. And that's the whole idea, is to avoid the system, to have less cases in Israel involving that. I think, like I said, it's a really nice concept.
Okay, great. Can you explain in Israel what is the terminally ill patients law? And can you explain, talk a little bit about the benefits?
Yes. I find in a lot of ways it's similar to the continuing power of attorney, in that it lets someone make decisions ahead of time. And what it is if you're in the last 6 months of your life, you're able to file a document, basically, that states how you want or what treatments you will want or won't want. Again, for me, if I have people who haven't made one already, I don't make a new one. What I do is I just take that information and put it into the continuing power of attorney. The continuing power of attorney, just so that you know the way it works here, is, and this is, I always say, and people laugh at me, that we're still a bit Bolshevik here in Israel. And here, in the United States, when you, whichever state you're in, if it's an advanced health directive, if it's a living will, but usually you go to your attorney, the attorney drafts what you want, and you execute, and that's it. Okay. There might be a notarization or whatever. It doesn't make a difference. But the point is, the government doesn't get involved.
Right.
Here, we have to prepare the document. We do an initial submission to the general guardian online, and they, give it the okay. And after that, we go and we sign it with the people being the person who's making the power of attorney, plus the appointees who are going to be making the decisions for them. And we sign all of them, and then we resubmit it, and they check it again, and only then is it valid.
Okay, got you.
But in any case, back to what you were saying with the law that you were speaking about, is that someone in the last 6 months of their lives is able to go and file this document, and through it they are able to state which types of medical care they're going to want. It's limited to medical care as opposed to the general power.
Got you. And who determines that you're in the last 6 months of your life?
Your general doctor.
So the doctor
makes
will
a determination.
We feel that this person has 6 months.
Right.
So it has to be 6 months. If somebody comes to you and says, the doctor says, I think you've got a year to live, you've got to wait.
I mean, theoretically, I'm assuming that the answer is no.
Right.
I just haven't encountered it. Again, what I encourage people to do is I look, and in general, in elder law in our practice, we look for comprehensive solutions, including, when we do the estates or the estate planning, etc. We don't want just a piece here, a piece there, a piece there. Of course, the law allows it, and that's an older law, by the way. In other words, the continuing power of attorney was enacted after that. And like I said, I think that the continuing power of attorney encompasses a number of things.
So would this involve something like, let's say somebody didn't want to be put on life support, for example?
Exactly.
So they could elect not to be put on life support?
Exactly, you would state specifically. Understand that in Israel, once they start care, they can't disconnect you.
Okay.
But you can refuse care beforehand. That's really part of the reason that I encourage people when we do the continuing powers of attorney. First of all, I tell them, listen, speak to everybody about it. Let all the people, especially the appointees, know what you want beforehand. Okay. And second of all, make sure they have a copy of the document so that if something happens, they can whip it out. We can really quickly file the one-pager saying, hey, it's in effect, and you don't accidentally get hooked up to something that you can't be disconnected from.
So maybe I'm not understanding something, but why in order to make that decision, let's say I elect not to be on life support, why do I have to be in the last 6 months of my life to be able to put that down on paper? Why couldn't, for example, I say now, listen, at any point in my life, I choose not to be on life support?
Because that was the way the law worked beforehand.
Okay.
I can't say why. Why answer?
Because I can always change that, right? If 5 years down the line I decide not to.
Absolutely.
So I'm just thinking, why couldn't I nominate that now?
Absolutely. And again, that was the old way of doing things, and they put this new tool. Like I said, I wouldn't say that it replaces it, because it doesn't. However, what I try to do is just use the one tool to encompass everything.
So something that we see here in Israel is people have what we call foreign caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
Would you maybe explain, is your foreign caregiver able to get rights to your assets?
Okay, so the question is a little bit different.
Okay.
First of all, the court cases that we see are usually where someone leaves the assets to the foreign caregivers in a will.
Okay, so they've actually left it to the people the person that.
And or I think there have been cases also where people actually like deeded an apartment or something to them. Okay. And then the question becomes, okay, well, first of all,
so really, can they inherit from you is really the question. Are they
Correct.
able to? Okay.
Correct. And so the answer is that theoretically they can, but that's the type of will that's going to get challenged. Was there undue influence? Was there fraud involved, etc.? I would say that as a practical thing, if someone were to say, hey, I have $1 million, I'm leaving $50,000 to my foreign caregiver, that I don't think is something that would be challenged on its face.
Yes.
Okay. But something with the cases where we see where they leave their apartments to the foreign caregiver.
Yes.
Those are the types of things that are challenged. And then sometimes it stands, sometimes it doesn't. They have to look into, and it's a fact-based decision. Was there undue influence? Was there fraud involved? Was the person mentally competent at the time that they made the will or the transfer, etc.?
So basically, we're talking about, under normal circumstances, if nobody cared, or that you could just leave whatever you want to that foreign caregiver, and even though they may not be a citizen, or they're here on a work visa or something like that, they can still inherit that property or that money.
Yeah, citizenship has nothing to do with inheritances.
Okay.
In other words, I meet this kid in Ethiopia, and dirt hot, and I decide I want to leave him everything. I can leave him everything.
Right.
I mean, wherever people live, they're able to inherit it from you.
So what we're really talking about is where maybe a family member is upset at the will, and they feel like the caregiver had influenced the person, or it got them to change their will or something like
Correct.
that.
It's the same thing as people have with the second wife who's a 28-year-old that's married the 96-year-old, and then all of a sudden the kids find out that they inherit nothing.
Right. So. Got you. Can we maybe talk about, let's say you've got one of your children, and they want to be appointed as a legal guardian. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Right.
And how that works?
Okay. So that's usually the situation where we're outside of the continuing power of attorney. In other words, we don't have a continuing power of attorney in place, and someone is incompetent. I start seeing, mom's doing these crazy things. I see when I help her with a checkbook that there have been 100,000 shekels that have gone out to all sorts of different things. Or alternatively, mom can't take care of herself, but she's not willing to accept help.
Yes.
So in those cases, what we can do is we can petition the court to appoint us as a guardian.
Okay.
Now, understanding that there's always the risk that the court might appoint somebody else. What I usually tell people when they come to me and they want to start this is my first question is, hey, do all the siblings and or if there's another parent, does everybody agree?
Right.
Okay. Because I tell them otherwise I can't tell you how much litigation there's going to be in this issue. Yeah. Whereas if everybody's agreeing, then it's a much easier and smoother process. Now, still, there's going to have to be a psychiatric evaluation done on the parent that you want to take over. But the question is, how long and how hard a process is it going to be? And is there a good chance that the person that wants to be appointed will be appointed? If everybody's in agreement that, we want, our brother Joe to be appointed, then there's a better chance than if, Joe and Sally and Alexa all want to be appointed. Right. And then there's a good chance that they'll just appoint a third party who's not connected to the family.
So basically, there's a few steps in the process. First of all, it has to be deemed that person really needs to have a legal guardian.
Absolutely.
So that would be the first step. And then, obviously, I mean, I would imagine it's in the state's interest. If all the family members are in agreement to have that family member appointed, it would be in the state's interest to have that person, unless there's some kind of challenge within the family.
Correct. Although they will check. In other words,
right.
Part of the process is they'll verify that everything's correct.
Okay. So, but failing that, then the state will appoint a legal guardian.
Correct.
Okay. And if there's let's say there's two family members. Would the court then decide, or would the state just say, no, we would rather just appoint a third party?
They'll ask for an opinion from the general guardian.
Okay.
And then they may do what's suggested. But like I said, those are the cases where I find there's a lot more going to a third party than to one of the parties who originally wanted.
Got it. Maybe as we start to wrap up, something that comes up, people with elderly parents or people that are wanting to make aliyah later on in life. For people that want to move to Israel at a later stage, maybe once they've retired, is it possible for them to get health insurance? How does that work?
So, A, yes, they can get health insurance.
Okay.
B, it might be more expensive. In other words,
is that through
remember
the
that there
Kupa
are
or is
three
that
levels.
private?
Right. So remember, there are three levels that we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's the Kupa level,
yes.
which everybody is able to get at a certain point.
Regardless of when you come to Israel?
Regardless of when you come to Israel. Okay. There's the premium Kupa level, okay? Like the gold or the...
Maccabi Zahab, Maccabi Shalim.
Exactly, okay? I don't know that everybody's eligible for that.
Okay.
And then there's private insurance.
Right.
But private insurance can be much more expensive.
Okay.
I always encourage people to, first of all, get quotes beforehand, okay? And make sure that you go to a qualified insurance agent to, make sure and really take that into account in their aliyah planning of what the expense is going to be.
That's great advice.
Okay, and also to find out, if they'll still be eligible for, Medicaid and or Medicare if something goes wrong and they want to fly back.
Right.
What are they covered for? And not that I'm suggesting to do that.
Okay.
Just
so they can keep their, let's say they're from the US, they can keep their US medical insurance even when they come and live in Israel.
Well, again, they might have to continue paying for it. The US side, I can't tell you as much. I just tell people, listen, check it out, because you don't want to make decisions without having the complete picture.
Right.
Okay. However, I haven't seen anyone who has not been able to get insurance. Just sometimes they have to pay through the nose for it.
Right.
If you come here to Israel at age 92 and you have a zillion pre-existing conditions, then I'm sure it's going to be incredibly expensive. Or maybe in that situation you won't be able to. But generally, people who are retiring, I have not seen a problem with them getting insurance. And I can speak from my own parents' aliyah as well. They came in their 60s. And it wasn't a problem. I mean, until today, they still have their insurance. They have all three levels.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to know. Maybe, Jay, to wrap up, could you is there something that we haven't discussed or something that you'd like to just add before we go?
Look, I think I'll add two things. First of all, what's really important when you're coming to Israel, considering coming to Israel, in retirement or when you're already up in your years, is to plan well in advance. In other words, utilize Nefesh B'Nefesh if you're American, or Telfed if you're South African, all the organizations, and really, have answers and plan properly. Because if you plan properly, your elder years here can be, very good. That's number one. And then number two, just because so many people ask me about it, they ask me about learning Hebrew if they come and they're older. And, number one, you can live in areas where you're not going to really need Hebrew that much. Whether it's the Anglos centers in, Ra'anana, or in certain areas in Jerusalem or in Modi'in. I've met plenty of people who have come and not learned Hebrew, and they get along just fine, number one. And number two, I'll always, my father is in his 70s, and some of his grandchildren still, laugh. Grandpa, are you ever going to graduate from Kita Gimel? And he doesn't, but every year or every couple of years, he still goes back and does an ulpan again. And has it affected his life? And I look and I say, no, he leads a very nice and fulfilling life here in Israel, even though, I'm sure he would want his Hebrew to be better than it is, and that's it.
Great. It's great advice. Jay, thanks again so much for coming in. Been really informative as usual. Thanks for your time.
B'simcha. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for watching.